Hey Joe, they took down our music again, so you need to sing the intro.
Do 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 do. All right, there we go. Intro done. Boom.
Hey everybody, welcome to
Preach.
That was really good.
Done.
You were I feel like you knew what I was gonna ask you. Welcome
I had
to
no idea. I was just like, I'm ready to do whatever you're about to tell me to do. I was just bought in.
They keep taking down the music on YouTube, even though I've paid for it. And it's like I dispute it and they're like, oh yeah, you're right, you own the rights to it. But then it's like 72 hours later after like all of the downloads have happened and it's worth it.
Stupid.
So it's just
Perfect system. Perfect system.
It's great. Great for small creators. But hey everybody, welcome to episode 68 of Tactical Crouch. Of course, Yiska and Volamel with myself, KickedTripod. But we've got a special guest on the show today. GM of the Florida Mayhem. Looking good in that Vice City color scheme. A little bit of a rebrand this week, but it is none other than Albert. Yeah.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
I see that
Thanks for being here.
you finished decorating the room that you're in.
Yeah, my office. Yeah, pretty Spartan. Just
Minimalist vibes.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's
This is a place of business, okay?
yeah, true. Right?
Exactly.
No fun allowed, yeah.
No fun. Yiska has just this weird plant that's a lamp in the back. Maybe he can send you that. Apparently, that's interior
functional.
Yeah,
decorating
ready to
now.
water that one.
Don't do it. We do have a packed show for you, so we're gonna probably dive right into it before we do a few housekeeping things. First and foremost, big thanks to our patron producers, Battlecrab, Maid, Pin, Lulshin, and Charlie L for supporting the show. We love you guys. If you like the show and want to support, go to patreon.com/tacticalcrouch. You can support there or sub right here at twitch.tv/KickedTripod. Another great way to support this show. Otherwise, just go to the internet and type in Tactical Crouch. If you don't know where to find it, where to follow us, we're everywhere at that. That's it. Let's jump into things. And the first thing is that the Florida Mayhem Winter Classic happened over the weekend. And that was pretty cool. We got to see some really great Tier 2, Tier 3 collegiate teams go head-to-head. And I got to watch the first day pretty extensively, and I didn't get to watch the rest. But yeah, I wanted to kind of ask you, like, were you at all involved in the Winter Classic at all, or is this something just kind of going on with the Mayhem crew while you focus on 2020?
Personally, I was involved in the execution. That was all on Brandon for setting that all up, but I did help him with like brainstorming the format, like who we should be inviting, because it is something that I wanted to do last year, or was it last year? Yeah, well, last year. But I think, what are issues with the league and like how many online, there's a debate or an issue with if we can have like an online tournament. Because I think it was just last year was restricted to like in market, like had to be in Florida. Whereas now it's like opened up, which is why we're able to have an online tournament that's, Mayhem Classic instead of someone personal. Like I think Jane did a bunch of tournaments, but it was under Jane's name, so it's different story, different rules. But yeah, happy that's open now. And I was happy to assist in like the brainstorming of like helped a little bit on the logo. But yeah, I can't take credit for the execution. That was on Brandon for, putting it all together. So big props to Brandon for that.
Did you get to watch any of the games?
Yeah, I watched most of the games actually, except for the finals. Didn't get to watch that, but all the other games. So yeah, I saw most of the top 3 teams. So yeah, Revival, Third Impact, Skyfox. Saw a lot of those games. And then I saw the one Old Man Strength game. But yeah, watch most of the cast.
How close are those guys to the actual meta that eventually will be run, if you can't say as much?
I mean,
there was a lot of trolling to be fair.
I haven't seen Soldier in I don't know how long, and I saw way too much Soldier.
Sorry, who?
Does that hero exist?
Yeah, he exists apparently, and so yeah, they're playing like Anna, Soldier, Tracer. Our Third Impact was, and getting away with it for a little bit. So yeah, some interesting comps. I think it's too early to say. I think even Owl teams were still figuring things out, and I don't know if this BAP change is gonna come before
Right.
the season starts. It might not. So we'll see. Lots of things to still work through. And yeah, we haven't scrimmed. Our guys are still in Korea right now, so we haven't scrimmed a lot of the teams that are in NA that didn't go boot camp in Korea. So I can't really say, I don't feel comfortable being like, hey, this is the meta, like this is what's gonna happen, like
Sure.
that's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely not Soldier. That's all I know.
It's just because of the new ugly sweater skin, probably. Yeah, you can play it now, and so you get that ugly sweater skin in. So what about? I mean, you said that this is something that you've been wanting to do for a long time. Why? Like, what's the importance of doing some sort of tournament that includes teams like this?
I mean, that's my roots, right? I competed in Tier 3 for a very long time. We were top at Tier 3 at different points in my career. I just never made it to Tier 2. And I think, now that I'm retired and I'm, in a management role, I think it's my job I want to provide as many chances for people that have been grinding Tier 3 to, make it to Tier 2, or people grinding Tier 2 to get looks at from, Tier 1. I think that's very important for the ecosystem. And I think it's just me doing my part. I know how hard it is to be a Tier 3 player. It's still hard. You can't sell your like contender slot anymore if you get it. You can't. Not many teams supporting that, and you're still playing for BlizzBucks as of last year. So it's tough. It's tough going for Tier 3 for sure. So anything I can do for my position to help out, definitely happy to.
Do you think that that's a really important part of like that Tier 3 part is just getting the eyes? Like there was, well over 1,000 people watching. I would say most of it is just when you have over 1,000 people plus watching these players. Do you think that invigorates that Tier 3 that Tier 3 scene, kind of helps put the right eyes on it to hopefully, get into like those kind of borderline contenders trials or contenders teams?
I don't think as much as the viewership as it is just providing a competitive environment where there's something to play for, and to get them experience, because there's really not that many Tier 3 tournaments. When I was playing, we had like Academy weeklies. We were playing for like $200 a week, and that's like $200 divided by 6. That's enough for like a meal.
That's barely my DoorDash like fees.
It's a lunch order
yeah,
somewhere.
that's my DoorDash fees. Yeah.
So yeah, just like that kind of, just getting them more exposure, getting them more, so like eyeballs, but like most importantly, providing a competitive environment where they can test their skills against, people that are actually trying, and not just trolling. Because I think a lot of AG weeklies were just like, hey, let's just have this random like pro pug come in and see what's going on. So I wanted to, like breakable barriers. I think our tournament was different from breakable barriers on purpose. Like it wasn't just pug teams, even though there were a lot of like teams that hadn't figured out their roster yet, or they're still in trials, so they had fielded a certain roster that probably doesn't reflect what their actual roster is going to be in open division or contenders next year. But overall, I think it's important to like give these players some publicity. A lot of them have been grinding for a while. Like I learned some new names that I haven't seen before. Also saw some old names that are still playing from when I played. So yeah, like a lot of the old man strength players I'm not familiar with. Yeah, I think it's important to get eyeballs on people and give them, I won't say hope, but give them, basically give them hope
something
that
to do.
They're right, something to play for, something to look forward to.
Path to pro. That's
part of it.
That's
Part of
a
it.
part of the path to pro, right? Is
Right.
Getting in those competitive environments, getting those competitive reps in, and saying, yeah, I did compete in tournaments that were more than just open division. And of course I got seeded against, a number 1 team in my second round, and we were done, and I didn't even pay for my WoW subscription that month. And, so I think that's great. That's awesome. Something
Very commendable.
We really wanted to talk to you about is just kind of your background in general. And you, when we were preparing for the show, you brought up some really interesting points about just kind of your background overall. You're coming in as the GM now this year of the Florida Mayhem, but you have not always been the GM of the Florida Mayhem, and
That is correct.
that's maybe an understatement. You've been with the Florida Mayhem, like Misfits organization since like April of 2018, right? So you've actually been with the team for a long time. Tell us a little bit more, even before Mayhem. Paint us a word picture, if you will, about kind of your experience of how you got into this GM role from somebody who, you said you started and were playing as like a tier 3 player.
Yeah, so it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible, as concise as possible. So yeah, started as a player, captained a bunch of teams, scouted a bunch of players, made a bunch of teams, made, I think, the last serious team before I retired, and I don't count SMC as like a serious team, even though we did win Open Division. That was a fun run. Not scrimming once. But yeah, so it was Rockets is what we were called. Rockets Esports, and we had myself, Ponzor, Red Star, or sorry, at the end of the roster was Enlayer, who played for Atlanta Reign. We had Stratus, DC, myself, Progi. Yiska probably knows Progi, German.
Yeah.
German guy. Yeah. He was our main tank. I was the off tank. And then flex support was Zerglin. But yeah, so we graduated a significant number of players for being tier 3. Yeah, Progi's now was head coach of Germany. Not sure what I haven't kept up with him recently. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but yeah, Enlair and Stratus both had OWL careers, and Stratus still, is still in OWL to this day. And Ponzor was on GGEA for a while, on the Outlaws Academy. Yeah, so that was my team. After we broke up, because they got academy offers, and at that time I was 25. I'm 27 now, so at 25, it's like not many academy teams are going to want a 25-year-old. There's already one cool man in the league, so there's no more room for old men like me. So I chose to hang it up. Actually, immediately after, I tried to do it again, and then I saw the talent left, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I went from like top tier 3, and now it's like I'm trying out for some like random teams, and yeah, I just hated my experience there.
I might have tried out for my plat team at one point. I'm just kidding. No. You did it. No.
And then yeah, so at that point, Jamie was also former Prestige Worldwide. So he used to be an old teammate of mine. We're still good friends to this day. He was at NRG, not quite as high as where he is now. But I think he was an account manager at the time. But I talked to him. He was like, "Oh yeah, like we're our contenders team. They were building their first contenders team, first iteration of NRG." And then I asked him, "Hey, can I help out? Like I'll bring in Shu to work with me, and then help build you guys the best team that you can." And so yeah, that was my first experience with managing building teams, was NRG. Very grateful for that opportunity. We built a decent team. I think a lot of them, I think for any contenders team, I think the true measure is not the results. It's more of how many players get moved up to OWL.
Yeah.
I think that's the best metric to judge, how successful a team was. And in terms of that, NRG was very successful. I think
arguably the most successful.
One of 4 out of 6 of the players went on to OWL. Yeah, and then they continued to, after I left. So like that original roster was Swan, aka Butcher, Rob 420. They made him change his name. That was pretty funny. He hasn't changed it back though. He's not in contenders anymore. I keep telling Rob he needs to change it back to 420. Everyone loved that. Fazix, who played on DC, Stratus. Rascal was after me. I wasn't part of the Rascal thing, but Damon, who went to Shanghai season 1. Am I missing anyone? Oh, Smex, who's now in Paris. But roundabout way. He didn't go straight from NRG to Paris. But yeah, tons of players from that team made it to OWL. So yeah, very successful roster in terms of that. I helped, I advised. I was also consulting, kind of. Like I was in talks with like Shock about who they should pick up when they're struggling in season 1. So yeah, I recommended Architect, Choyobin, and Moth as well, because I've had a lot of experience playing against Moth. This was back when Moth was tier 3, if you guys can imagine that. He's literally I'd say he's top 2, maybe top 1, like maybe the best main support in the league right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time he was grinding. He was playing for Toronto Esports.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
I
for a
played against.
collegiate team, I think as well, right?
Yeah, I think
He
the
was
collegiate
playing.
was more of a. I think collegiate likes to claim that like Moth came from collegiate, but to me, that's not how the story
Yeah,
goes.
no.
He was grinding tier 3 for a long time. Against me. For most of it. Wish I got to play with Moth, but I did. But yeah, so like that's kind of the energy shock time, and then I applied for analyst position for the Mayhem off Facebook. I can't remember the last time I used Facebook, but maybe it was that.
Really?
Serendipitous.
That's amazing.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Tier 1 pro tip for those trying to get into the scene: Facebook jobs. There you go.
And that was completely cold. I had nobody, no contacts, no connects in Mayhem. So yeah, only thing was my player experience and energy. I coached a brief bit after for a few weeks, maybe a month. Yeah, I coached with 9K actually. That's important. 9K is one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. Probably one of the best coaches in the world for sure. So I worked with him on energy, and I was like, hey, you guys got to pick up this guy, make him the head coach of your academy team, and he did that, and then got promoted real quick. But yeah, great guy. Love 9K. He reminds me of Bill Belichick. I always tell him that when I see him, because he always has a hoodie on. He just, no matter what, he's always has his hood up, wearing a sweater. So yeah, it reminds me of Bill Belichick
It's
a lot.
104 degrees, man.
No, he was in Korea. So I was in Korea, and he was wearing his hoodie like indoors. It's like 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know Celsius, but yeah, to me, it had to be about 80 inside the arena. He was wearing his hood up, looking like Bill Belichick. So.
A man of
So
culture.
yeah. Anyways, but yeah, back on track. Went to got the job at Mayhem. Interviewed a bunch. They liked me, brought me on as an analyst, which was, I guess, I took a step down to take a leap forward, essentially, because I was assistant coach on NRG. Then I became an analyst for Mayhem, and that was after the signing window. So like did analyst, then I got promoted, I think 4 times now to hit GM. And we can kind of go in depth on those as we go about the show. But yeah, so analyst to GM, 2 years. Yeah.
It's a
Quite the
grind.
rise. Yeah.
That's a grind. I think I would maybe be putting words in the mouth, but I think that's kind of like how, if you're in like the Overwatch League office and you're talking about how you want people to progress through the system, not saying that all the instability around it, and I'm sure you were making cash money in tier 3. I'm sure that was totally a thing, and you were totally living off of that and super comfortable, right?
Yeah.
But the actual progression of when you succeed and you there are paths, and you found ways to make it, kind of step by step up and through.
I will say I'm very fortunate in the path that I took, just because it's like throughout my tier 3 time as a player, I always had a full-time job that I was holding down on top of scrimming. Well, it used to be 6 hours a day. It used to be like I'd work 9 to 5, come home, like rush home, take me 30 minutes to get home, 5:30 to 6, like make something real quick or buy something, eat dinner, then scrim 6 to 12 Eastern, like every day. That was so tough. So I got to the point where it's like I put in all this time, didn't see like the fruits of my labor, because I was getting old as well. For esports, obviously, 25 is not old anywhere else.
Right.
But yeah, for esports, it's fairly old, especially if you're not already at like the tier 2 academy level. So yeah, it just came. I have no debt, and I could take a pay cut I was living in Manhattan. I took a huge pay cut to, chase my dream. So yeah, I would say I'm very fortunate. I think a lot of people probably aren't in a very similar situation. I guess at least financially. But yeah, I was very fortunate in that I've been able to hold down like a full-time job while pursuing my passion, my hobby, and eventually turn my hobby into a full-time job.
You made it count. So you made it count. So big congrats on that. You're here at the GM level, Overwatch League, but we do need to talk about the Florida Mayhem. And
yes,
we told you ahead of time we're not gonna pull punches on this.
Please don't punch me right in the face.
All right. Come closer. No, just kidding. So So it's pretty safe to say that the first two seasons haven't quite gone the way I think anyone in the Mayhem organization kind of have wished that it would have gone. You have 15 former players and only one still playing in Overwatch League currently. You have 10 former coaches, scouts / GMs, so people in the organization level,
Right.
which is pretty high overall. There's a few other actually orgs that actually have quite a bit of organizational turnaround as well. You're a second to last finish at 7-33 in 2018, a last place finish last year at 6-22 in 2019, and the Florida Mayhem, you've got a pretty big hole to dig out of in 2020. There's I think a lot of people who immediately and skeptically, like Joe, who will immediately put you in the bottom 5 because of what we've seen from the first 2 years.
Right.
You've been with the league or with the organization just about as long as anybody. So before we even talk about how we're fixing things in 2020, what have been the major obstacles into finding and fielding a team that can reasonably compete in the Overwatch League over these first 2 seasons? Because so far, we haven't quite gotten to see that Mayhem team that's fighting for play-ins or in playoffs. Instead, it's a team that has, really, really struggled to put something together through multiple iterations.
Yeah, definitely fair question. I'm happy to address it. So let's just start kind of chronologically. Like season 1, I already said I wasn't there until after the signing deadline, so I had no, also I was an analyst, so I didn't have any input on who they chose to pick up and what the roster looked like heading into season 1. I will say now it's been 2 years, so Misfits at one point was working towards a 12-man roster with Misfits and Gigante, if you guys remember that roster.
Yeah.
So that would have been
Okay.
We'll never know how that might have looked.
Yeah.
But when I heard that, I was like, wow, like that, that would have been pretty awesome roster to see in action, like a full European team with the 2 top contenders team at the time. But yeah, besides that, I don't have any additional insight on the roster building. I just know that fell through. Gigante, the team got split up and went to different teams. Yeah, so never happened, but what if, one of the great what ifs of that nobody knows about.
Joe does alternate Overwatch history, so I can't wait to see
was
that
that
one.
It's funny you mentioned that. That was actually one of the I try to outsource and do content that people want to see, and that was one of them. It was like, what if Florida picked up Gigante? What if they were a mixed team? That's pretty interesting. I'm excited. It shows that there was an attempt. Obviously plans fell through, but could have been a whole lot different.
I can't speak to anything else besides that. Yeah, obviously we picked up Saya, and we had to deal with meta and picked up 2 players and a coach. So yeah, Saya, SNT, and Ryder at the time. But yeah, so I arrived after all that. Don't have any additional insight in season 1. Season 2, I started off as an analyst and then got promoted a few times. But in the off season, at least, I was an assistant GM yet. In the off season, so we did a lot of trials. I think we valued trials too much, and I think we put too much emphasis on trials, and we didn't think bigger picture. Like we should have entertained, like tried to go for trades or try to acquire players from within the league. I think that's something that we definitely missed out on in the off season heading into season 2. So yeah, the players that we chose were the players that did the best in our trials. The scope of how we looked at roster building heading into season 2 was definitely lacking in hindsight. Just too much emphasis on trials. We just picked who went well in trials, and then turns out, hey, look, we have a 3-3 meta for basically the entirety of season 2. So yeah, and then mid season 2, I pitched. There were multiple plans being pitched to how to, after we had that disastrous stage 1, how we could turn around the team in the season. But yeah, we pitched a bunch of plans. Another plan was chosen instead of mine. And then, you know, that's where we are in after season 2. Players didn't get here until stage 4, basically, and our season, you know, even if we had won every single game in stage 4, it wouldn't matter.
Right.
So
True,
we didn't.
yeah.
If you can't answer this, don't answer it. But can you tell us a little bit about the plan that you had pitched to turn around the Mayhem in season 2?
So after stage 1, obviously we brought in McGravy. I was a big proponent behind bringing McGravy in. The thing with making mid-season changes is if you want to bring in Koreans and have a competitive impact, they can't be ones that don't already have visas. Because I knew going in that it was going to take at least 2 months. Like, optimistically, it would take 2 months to get them here. And that's not including, like, negotiations, like, delays. Like, if someone's not on top of that visa process, like, an email gets lost, you can easily set yourself back, like, weeks to a month, you know, even if you're on top of it. So I knew, like, we're at the end of stage 1. If we get Korean players, they're not gonna get here till, you know, very optimistic, like mid stage 3. On top of that, those players can be rusty. Because what happens when you pick up players from Korean contenders is the Korean contenders team goes, okay, they've been picked up, so it's in their best interest to not play them anymore. They sold them. You know, they want it on to the next, right? It's a farm system. They want to bring in new talent. So that was the issue I saw with going full Korean, like, mid-season. We already have McGravy. Like, he's clearly a good off-tank in GOAT's meta. I think he's good off-tank in general, but, you know, for the purposes of framing it, it was Brown McGravy for GOATs. He had, if you guys remember his debut, he had a crazy debut.
Yeah.
A perfect map, essentially, on Nibani. Yeah, we had a lot of close games with him, and, you know, we were mixed at the time, and I think I wanted to go more mixed. We had a great academy team, so I was in charge of building the academy team at that time. We had great coaching that we could have brought up, like Curry Shot, I think, is a genius. One of the best coaches in the league strategically. No doubt in my mind about that. We could have brought up Curry Shot. We could have, you know, we had Shax. Like, we had a pretty good academy roster that we could have, you know, brought up with little to no buyout. I mean, sorry, why did I say no buyout? We would just bring them up, and plug them in, see how they do. They don't need visas. We already had P1s for the players that were there, because we've always gotten P1s for our academy players, which I think a lot of other organizations didn't. They just had them playing in, you know, wherever they happen to be playing. So Shax had P1, making sure he had a P1. Everyone's ready to go. We just had to call them up. So my pitch was straight gravy. He's Envy. We'd bring in. It'd be a hybrid, like, Envy, Mayhem Academy type roster.
Interesting.
I like that a whole lot better.
Yeah.
So basically, not, you know, I don't know how that roster would have done, but regardless of how they would have done, the fact is we would have probably performed better in stages 2 and 3, than just not having anyone at all, and just having to tough it out.
And that has knock-on effects, right? Like, you build up some momentum, you build up some confidence. Granted, you know, it's a kind of a honeymoon roster, but because
our one flex DPS was apply, right? And so once we decided to go full Korean, we didn't have a flex DPS anymore. Right. I will say, silver lining, BQB expanded his hero pool by an incredible amount, because he had to basically play flex DPS while not having played flex DPS before in his life. So never picked up May before, never played May. And he had a pretty good May by the end of it. So yeah, silver lining there. But in terms of saving our season 2, in my mind, once we went that route, we basically cemented our fate as, you know, bottom.
Yeah. Just, this is where you go stone-faced and you don't react to this. But I remember having a podcast with your GM at the time for Watch the Overture. Yep. And the one thing that stands out to me is I felt like we reached a consensus on that podcast saying, like, trials almost don't matter. Results matter. And then you meet the player for, like, a meeting. Maybe you go out to dinner, see that he isn't a lunatic or is actually, like, what kind of a person he is. And then you say, okay, that's the relevant thing. and then maybe I look a little bit at trials, right? That's the first thing that stands out. That's sort of interesting. And then pretty much like my concerns I raised there in the mid season as well with the pickups and especially the visa delay, which by the way this season of course will be an issue once again, even more so.
Sure.
That's certainly interesting. Just don't want to wake like the retired, but that's certainly interesting to hear it now from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think trials is helpful if you say you have a solid core and you want to try out like say an unproven player. But I think if you're fairly certain if they're top of Korea, like our pickups, they're gonna do fine.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of, and plus like you're gonna tell like players like Sparkle or Yaki, hey, we need to trial you first before like we make an offer. Like they're gonna be like, I've been trialing, like you can just see my body of work in contenders, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody would want to do that. So yeah, I think it makes sense for certain players to say like unknowns, X factors. You want a high variance player. You think they have a lot of potential. Sure, try them out. But I think it's just different rosters. So I think if you have a tight budget, for sure, like trials, you have to do trials. But if you have enough to get top tier players, those top tier players aren't going to be trialing anyways. So
yeah,
even if you wanted to trial them, most likely you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, and then I definitely share your points that your academy team was already like I arguably they underperformed in their contender season. They showed their potential by being the first
in playoffs. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. To beat
Fusion
the Fusion
Uni, right?
Fusion Uni, in like over a year.
Yeah, they sent Fusion Uni to Korea, all right?
Yeah, they.
I like that.
Yeah, buddy, they did. Let's go. Yeah.
And slept then him off them as well now.
Yeah, basically. The killers.
Yeah, and definitely interesting insight. Also unfortunate that, at least from your standpoint, that so many of them were then instrumental in the comeback of the Valiant. Right?
Yeah, I mean, Valiant's basically the Mayhem refugee camp at this point. I think there's so many of our players there. I love them to death.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we did get Fate out of it. I think that was a monstrous trade for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think both sides got what they needed. Valiant, were able to almost make a playoff push. They're one game off, right? If I remember correctly. Yep. It's been a long off season.
Sure.
Yeah. So they were one game off, and they were close. They turned around their season. Whereas us, Fate's a solid piece to build around. So I think benefits for both teams. Obviously Valiant more in the short term. But I'm happy with how the trade ended up. We found places for. I mean, the most important thing from my point of view as a GM is, or just as a manager of teams, is make sure my players, get to places where that's best for their careers. That's more important to me. That's like my directive number 2 from myself. Besides, my team performance first, and then, but I think close second is keep maintaining relationships, having good relationships with players, because you never know what happens. And I think it's important to not scuttle people's career. I have an interview right now. All good. Sorry,
it's all good.
It's all right, man. Yeah, it's all good. So Joe, is this your question about Zephyr?
Yeah, so this has been somebody that I've always been interested in because he's kind of just floated around and jumped from team to team, and he's never really shown what it sounds like he does behind the scenes. So I wanted to not pick on him, but talk about him in particular on this roster, because last year, obviously, he got some play time. Obviously didn't look fantastic.
Right.
Was that a strategic thing? Was that, what did he bring? Why was he necessarily kind of held on for so long? Could you talk a little bit about Zephyr as a player and as a commodity that kind of isn't really known?
And the Scrum God, of course.
Right.
Yeah, that's his moniker, right? Scrum God. Yeah, so pretty interesting. I'd say he was, for us at least, he was more of a trial god.
Okay.
Because he honestly popped off in trials when we were running 2-2-2 comps. Going into season 2, we were trialing 222, and he was doing really well. But I think, different players have different issues with adapting to new metas.
Sure.
And for some, they just can't play a certain meta. And for him, I don't think he ever fully grasped how to play Diva in goats. So I mean, I don't think that's a unique problem for Zephyr. I think a lot of players in the league in general had, like, DPS players had trouble picking up Zarya. I just think some people transitioned well, some people didn't. And that's why we brought in McGravy to try to turn that around. So yeah, after the trials, he obviously didn't perform. So we brought in Gravy, and then after we decided to go full Korean, we obviously had to use Zephyr until Gargoyle arrived. So yeah, but I think, as back to the transition, I think there were several teams in the league that struggled mightily transitioning. Like season 1, I mean, stage 1 was a crapshoot, right? Spark and Valiant both had zero win stages. DC obviously struggled like us until stage 4. So yeah, I think the teams that turned that around, did it with roster changes, or they waited until it was a meta that suited them better.
Yep. So this kind of brings up an interesting point, because it sounds like season 2 Mayhem, which you kind of saw, may not have been completely instrumental in, but it sounds like certain teams didn't necessarily build for the length of goats, and I don't know that even Blizzard could have predicted how long that was going to last for the umpteen patches they try to throw at it. Has that kind of influenced 2020's roster in terms of how you've built it there, where we may have just, seen this watershed moment in roster building where it's like, okay, if we have to play this meta for, X amount of months, can we? If there's multiple metas, can we? Like, has that really influenced 2020?
Well, I think it's more back to basics now with the 222 lock.
Sure.
I think you don't have as high variance in number of heroes a player might be expected to play. I think prior, Flex DPS could play, you probably needed to have a Roadhog maybe. Your hit scan probably had to have a Zarya to be successful. One of them had to be willing to play Brig and excel at it, and not just, going through the motions on Brig didn't get you anywhere. So yeah, like, it actually required skill to, like, know how to use your cooldowns, even though it was an overpowered character, and how to, like, carry and use your ults. So yeah, I think with the 222 roll lock, it helped a lot in terms of roster building, made it a lot more simpler. I don't need to look at DPS players that can play tanks. I don't need to look at tank players that can play DPS. I don't need to look at flex supports that can play Sombra. So it's a lot easier in terms of, it narrowed the scope of what a player is expected to do at their role. You still have guys that can play multiple roles, but I think the only person that really got put on multiple roles last year was Hydration, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, technically.
Did they play Rascal? Did they play Rascal and BAP after 222 roll lock though?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
I don't believe they did. I do think Rascal was the best Baptiste for a while. His Baptiste was crazy. He was like first one to, like, off angle like that, use window for himself as opposed to for the team, and get more value out of that. So yeah, for sure. Like, Rascal, big fan of his Baptiste play. But I don't think he played 2 different roles after roll lock.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think maybe there's still room for that. Maybe I'm a little dubious. I think it's easier just to have, hey, this is your best flex support player at these heroes. This is your so I think if you look at our DPS lineup right now, I think we cover all the bases pretty well. BKB can flex on a lot of heroes. Side players are, our sniper specialist star. Yaki can, he's a projectile flex. So that's kind of how I entered season 3, building the roster, just making sure we have our bases covered at their roles. And it made it easy. 222 roll lock made it easier because I don't have to look at, hey, do they cover their roles plus some potential, like, wild card ones.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. Joe, is that also your Runaway question?
No, But you know,
no.
Let's get through the juice.
Yeah, we
come
can.
on.
All right.
we can move on to the juicy bits. Yeah, that was Yiska's. I did not have the cojones to be like, well, listen.
Well, then we're gonna make Yiska ask it. That's what we're gonna do.
Sure. Like,
yeah.
Okay, man, you guys are really scared of other people, aren't you? Okay.
It's not that I'm scared, but I'm just like, I don't want to put, you know, in the position to be like, well, you know, I don't know, reports, man.
I want your question to
Okay.
be represented in the most intentional light possible. So,
Sure.
yeah. Okay.
So, okay, let's get to it. So, during the off season, of course, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of reporting, a lot of leaking, and you were connected to Runaway as a whole team. So as much as that is possible in terms of age restrictions and what's not. Like of course, there's some restrictions, even though one has to say now, like for instance, Mac could have possibly been signed, but wasn't, at least at this point in time. So how much is to that rumor? And if that was actually true, and you ended up with 2 people from Runaway at least, what happened?
So 100% false on the whole Runaway roster. That was never going to be a thing. That was never something we were even considering. Because, you know, I'm confident in our tank line. That's like Fate, Gargoyle. I think Gargoyle has a ton of potential. Fate, veteran player. He was top 5 in season 1. Like, I think undisputed top 5 main tank in season 1. And now it's 2-2-2 meta. Like, he'll be fine. He didn't do 2-0 in goats. A lot. I think most of the top 5 main tanks in season 1 didn't do well in goats.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you look at Gesture.
I guess that
there's a big shift.
Yeah.
Gesture, Fisher.
Yeah.
That's 3 of them. And then I think the other 2. I can't think of another 2 off the top of my head, but
Gamisu maybe.
Mono.
Yeah, Mono is a fair shout.
He did okay, but definitely not to the degrees that he did, you know, in Apex and NYXL season 1. So
the logic still stands. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting insight. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, never in talks to sign the whole Runaway roster. We were in talks to sign half. So 3. But you know, we ended up with 2. Off-season craziness. But I'm happy with the 2 that we got. I'm not going to tell you who the 3rd was. But yeah.
Yiska
Definitely 2
just keeps
big
saying,
signings.
damn it. Under his breath. Damn it. Yeah. All right.
Yehhh and Gangnam Jenner, nothing to be ashamed of like that. Those are 2 very, very nice signings. Definitely exciting players to see Florida pick up and hopefully do well with.
I've been surprised with the lack of Yehhh mentions when people talk about Rookie of the Year, like consideration.
Definitely a candidate.
He is a candidate. I would say he's a little bit outside. The problem is I have this idea of almost internal timers of player careers. And Yehhh has been
this kid's been grinding
pretty
forever.
good at the game since Apex Season 2, basically.
Yeah.
So it's always like, Yehhh, who are you? You know, these concerns. But I definitely agree. Like, for instance, when we had a show format with another podcast, ironically, with Mineral from Boston, where we had to answer what kind of a player we would choose to build a franchise around. And we couldn't take him out for 5 years. And I initially actually had Yehhh in that.
Okay.
Like I thought it's likely. Then again, since then a bunch of DPS players suggested themselves as well. Like Glister, I think a lot of people had Glister in that list, for instance. Sure. But yeah, Yehhh definitely insane, like on multiple heroes. And also, I'm not sure if he's like a hyper flex like Libero is or Prophet is or like they're not that many. But he's sort of close. He definitely has hit scan heroes, and he definitely has so top tier hit scan hero, hit scan and projectile. I'm not sure if he's above average on everything else like these 2 are. So we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, season will tell. I think people, including Spark, is a little weird because he's not. I think he's a really good player. I just don't think with half a season to be active for, he's going to be able, I don't think anyone's going to win MVP off of half of season performance.
Yeah, at least they shouldn't, right? By all means, I don't care how many flashy plays end up on Reddit. Homeboy should not be getting, marked over a rookie that's been playing all season and doing well, right? So
yeah, it's like we're playing a game of dice, and this one you can only use this one dice for the second half of the game, while everyone else is allowed to use all their dice, and then this kid is also only good if it rolls a 6 or a 5. Yeah, meaning like Doomfist or Farah. Like,
I mean, I played too much D&D, man. I'm like, I've seen that.
I think Sparkle has more than 2 heroes.
A little bit more, yeah.
Yeah.
But would you say so? Yeah, would you agree with his tendency to be aggressive? Let's say
Sparkles, or
Sparkles always struck me as a player who's like always aggressive.
But I think it helps a lot that Rush is coaching that team because he's put Sparkle in a position to succeed since
100%.
Sparkle joined that team. And I think it's important to have a coach that can unlock that potential. Question is, A, is it going to happen with the mixed roster? And B, like, is it going to be enough? I think those are like the big questions for them. And for us, Yehhh just made, like, I was interested in Sparkle. I think every GM in the league would be lying if they didn't look at Sparkle and was like, hey, let me pick him up. But for us, it made more sense for Yehhh because we don't have that backup flex DPS, right? So like we don't have the luxury to wait for Sparkle to come of age. Yaki's ready to go. And he'll be with us for the whole season and he's eligible. So I'm very happy with the Yehhh pickup. That was our position of most need as well. I think pretty obvious we needed a flex DPS. Yeah.
So let's go to the 2020 season a little bit. Let's talk about the future here. We've talked about the past, how we got here, but 2020 it's a different bird, if you will. And expectations are, I mean, at least comparatively, much higher for the Mayhem this season than they have been in seasons past. You've made some changes on the staff side. You've made some changes on the player side. You've signed 2 runaway players. Is there anything else out there that you think should be considered when looking at the Florida Mayhem and finding that optimism?
I think the optimism probably we ended the season on a high note. Meta changed. It's 2-2-2. Difference this season is at least the parameters have changed. So like, yes, it might be a new meta, but it's still be a meta where you play 2 of each hero as opposed to like 3-3 or 4. There's more variations without the roll lock. So I think there's more confidence going into the off season, and we had some high points like Gargoyle playing so well for us on multiple heroes. Mostly on Roadhog in stage 4. But I want to talk a little bit more about Gargoyle. Like I've seen people say like, oh yeah, but like he hasn't proven himself on anything. Like this guy has played every single hero that's been asked of him, like from contenders like to now, and he hasn't let people down. He started off as D.Va, then in GOATS, if you watch any of their games, he was playing the Zarya because he was their best Zarya player. He was doing really well in Zarya. And then when we got him, it was like, oh, now you have to play like D.Va, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now you have to play Hog. Like I'd never seen him play Hog in contenders. He was one of the best Hogs in stage 4. And a big part of why we won so many games. So yeah, I think Gargo's super strong, a lot of potential. Plus, going into the offseason, like everyone knew it was going to be Sigma. Like none of the teams that didn't get playoff experience has any idea like how good their Sigma player is until it happens. It's like, why take a risk on someone else that you have no idea what their Sigma is? Sure. But I'd rather take place of like, I'd rather bet on the player that I've seen continually adapt and add off tanks to his hero pool. So yeah, I think his Sigma's great. So we'll see. But yeah, so I think tank line's fine. People were very low on Fate last season just because GOATs. But as I said before, most of the top 5 main tanks from season 1 didn't have a good GOATs season. And now it's back to what they excelled at, which is in a 2-2-2 framework.
That's the question, if that's the case, because I'm not yet so sure. I've also heard that other aforementioned names in that category are still not doing well.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a question.
Sure.
Like we're not in a Winston meta as it looks
Right.
like. And that was
Who?
basically the crown, the crown discipline of top 5 of those top 5 tanks
Sure.
in season 1, right? So
Yeah.
that's certainly a question mark for me. Like if it is just generally, by the way,
Yeah.
is star power, how long does it last really?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So totally valid concern regarding like top 5 in general, but obviously I have more experience with Fate since I watch him and I hear the
Right.
comms. But like
Sure.
for us, he's a leader, very instrumental in our comms, in our comm structure, and calling plays, leading the team. So I think that in that aspect, I think that's more important. I think I agree. It's pretty hard to distinguish yourself on Orisa. It's just nature of the hero. So yeah,
Nice
I mean,
pull.
yeah, it's how many pulls do you have?
Yeah.
It's like the pulls, like it's just not sexy playing like popping off on
Yeah.
Orisa.
Yeah.
Even if they
I
pop on the
think
kill feed,
Orisa
it's
is
like
very sexy.
yeah.
Oh, you mean like gameplay stats wise? Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so Fate's an integral part of our team. I think the only other like people are concerned about BQB. I think we literally played him in a role that he's not supposed to be playing last year, just due to the nature of our roster and the limitations. So I feel like that shouldn't be a knock on him. And plus, he did fairly well when we had him play Hanzo in May towards the end of the season. So I think he's expanded. He got a chance to expand his hero pool last year just because he was forced to play on uncomfortable heroes. I think similar like Color Hex. Color Hex is not, he didn't have a Widow before he was forced to play Widow just due to the circumstances, right? And I think a lot of people forget the roots or like are unaware of like what that player's main hero pool is, and they just focus on, hey, like what have you done for me lately, right? And I think for BQB, it's like I'm confident in his hit scan like flexibility. Plus now he can add on a few projectile heroes or what used to be flex DPS heroes. So yeah, I'm high on BQB. Saya, I don't think anything needs to be said. I think he's the best sniper in the league, bar none. Me personally, but yeah.
Sure. I wouldn't argue with you.
And then I think flex support, I think everyone's pretty okay on. Now that we have 2, we have Ghanem Jin, we have Byram. I think we're set there. Chris, I get the criticism.
Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I get the criticism. Chris is like, he didn't look good in goats. But I think his calling's good and his Baptiste is actually pretty decent, or pretty good actually. I like his Baptiste a lot. In stage 4, he played a lot of Baptiste. I think he was fine there. And his calls, between that and his calls, I mean, he's not like the flashiest main support. Like he's not Masa like wall riding around, like booping, like going for X Factor plays or Moth, but not, there's very few main supports that can do all that and get away with it and also call at the same time. Like I don't know how many of those players are calling at the same time.
Sure.
Remains to be seen how Chris does, but I'm happy with Chris and I'm happy with his synergy with Fate, and I think that's important for team performance like moving forward.
Sure.
And I like the core. I think it's important to have, especially moving to season 3 where everyone's on the road. I think it's going to be really important how your baseline synergy, your baseline energy with your core day in and day out is going to be more important then, because you're not going to be able to get as much practice as you could last year. Like last year, you could have just, hey, we're going to do 3 days for like 3 weeks, to like grind it back up. Now it's like, okay, you can do like 3 for 1 day, 2 days, and then you got to fly out. So I think it's going to be, I think the load's going to be more on like coaching to be like, hey, let's play I think a lot of it's going to be like, hey, make sure we play our game rather than let's completely change what we're doing. Because I think it's going to be really hard to change what you're doing once the season gets underway with how hectic the schedule is this year.
So I'm glad you brought up the schedule, because I do want to talk about we've had D-Pay and packing. We're doing our Overwatch League coach and GM tour.
Okay.
We've got you here now. They've discussed kind of how the teams plan on traveling. And they kind of approach it a little bit differently. There's some, some squads are like, you know what, we're going to go 12. We're going to have 66. We're going to be able to scrim whenever we want. We're like having some people saying some people are staying, some people are going. How did the Mayhem plan on approaching traveling and practicing in 2020?
I'm happy with our roster. It's lean compared to some others. But why? Like what? Okay. When you have 12 players, there's 6 players that are always going to be disappointed. Because this is the first, for most of them, it's going to be their first time not being a starter for their team, and it has like very different effects on players when they're put in that situation. They might think it's a great idea, but most of them, like if you talk to any player, they're like, "Oh yeah, like I'll get the spot over whoever." Every player thinks that they're going to get the spot. One of them's always going to be disappointed. So I think for 12-man rosters, you're going to have 6 people disappointed at any given point, and have to deal with like 6 headaches essentially, like trying to how do we integrate them in the roster, like how do we keep them happy, how do we keep them motivated. I think those are some issues that I don't know. I don't know how each team's going to be able to deal with that. But for me, I think it makes more sense to have a tighter rotation. Like, hey, if this is the meta, like we can play you because you're good at XYZ. So they have like an actual tangible goal instead of like, hey, you are always competing with this person, and if you get benched, then they're like, because once you get underway, most teams are going to be focusing on Team A. That's just the nature of the beast, right? Focusing on Team B doesn't win you any matches. Focusing on Team A, the one you're going to play on stage, is the one that wins you games. So yeah, and plus we don't travel much, so we'll have much more. And East Coast is our division, doesn't really go anywhere, so we should be able to find plenty of scrims. So I don't think getting 12 just for scrims for us made too much sense. And yeah, we don't travel much. I don't think we'll have any issues finding scrims. And the PPAs, I don't know if you know anything about the specs, but they're insane. You're not going to get those specs anywhere at any LAN center probably in the world. It's just not the number of computers, but I've kind of alleviated that by our coaches will have laptops, like gaming laptops, so they won't take up like a PC. So our players should be able to play on the PPA PC. So the specs are like, I think they have to be like i9 9900Ks minimum with like 2080s and like 32 gigs of whatever RAM. So like crazy high specs, 240 hertz monitors. Like you're literally never going to find that at any LAN center. But to supplement that, like as a caveat to that, I do have, depending on the city, we will have sometimes where if we're, say first week we're in Philly for an extended period of time. So like I think we should get there on Tuesday. So probably like Philly and Paris at least, I'll try to source like a supplementary LAN center area where they can practice besides just the 4-hour PPA time slot that you get. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
So just to clarify for especially viewers, those PPA stations are the league mandated practice stations for the players at the venues, or what?
Correct. Player practice areas. That's the acronym.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
Okay. And can you talk about like the amount of stations that?
Sure. I think minimum is 8 PCs. So bare minimum. So like 8 PCs. So 8 9900Ks, whatever. And then I think additional seating for coaches and staff, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, minimum is 8.
Have they mandated how many hours you will get access to those at homestands?
I think it's 4 hours a day, at least. So, but I don't know what's gonna happen. Like maybe you get a time slot you don't want, perhaps. But there's always gonna be at least one other team practicing at the same time, because there's 2. So minimum 2 PPAs. So at any given time slot, unless for some reason a team doesn't want that time slot and there's no one else in the other PPA. But yeah, you'll have at least one practice partner or the option, and that's what people did at homestands. They just practiced with whoever was at the PPA with them at the same time.
Yeah, that would be interesting if something develops there. Like I feel like no shade here, but if I'm the San Francisco Shock and I get the same PPA time as the Boston Uprising, maybe I'm trying to get internal practice going instead and just get a ringer in for the 12th spot.
Well, Shock did do that last year. They did a lot more internals. They like supplemented their. They didn't have a full 12, but they supplemented it with bringers from
Boots, right?
contenders. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, interesting thing. I think teams with NA Academy teams, easy scrim
Yep,
partner.
yep.
Totally.
Unfortunately, we don't have an NA Academy team. But I'm confident we'll figure out scrims. I don't think finding scrims is going to be an issue.
Famous last words. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, there's we can also scrim other NA Academy teams. It doesn't have to be our own.
Yeah,
sure.
To Yehh's point, they are on the East Coast. They don't have to travel much. They're going to be very, very much local to scrimming. Some of the top NA contenders teams. So they've dodged the Chengdu bullet. I've heard that just getting Chengdu in your PPA. It's just like, all right, cool. I guess I'm playing against Ball today. Very sweet.
Yeah, so that's the one I like. The most impressive thing about the Chengdu saga last year was how well they did with the lack of practice, because basically nobody in League wanted to scrim them because they never played goats.
Yeah,
they never played goats, and they're just gonna play off meta. It's like a waste of scrim block for most teams. So yeah, I'm surprised. But they performed on. I don't know what kind of practice they ended up doing, because they were posing for scrims. I just see like empty blocks. Like we were able to get scrims, right, and we were the worst team.
Sure.
So I don't know how, I don't know what Chengdu did instead of scrimming. Maybe they stacked ranked. I'll never.
I remember a screenshot from one team to another, just going like, guys, I actually got Chengdu to practice codes against us. And everyone's like, what? How did you do this masterwork? Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Cool. So I think you kind of already at it. You kind of addressed this a little bit, but we have to ask anyway. You did say you're very lean. You're coming up 9 players confirmed signed going into the 2020 season. DPay was on previously and discussed we're sitting at 10 and we're kind of looking at adding a couple during the season and just kind of leaving a little bit there. Is that why you stay slim? Is it more for like what you said before? Like, how do you keep 12 players happy knowing that 6 of them are wanting to play and not? Can we expect any signings before the 2020 season starts, or is it kind of a play it by ear thing?
I don't think we're going to be signing anyone before it starts. I think mid-season there's always a chance, but hopefully, we do well enough where we don't, with the players that we have, that we don't need to add any more players to the roster. As I said before, like visa stuff. So us being full Korean, it's tough to add Korean players mid-season. Just do the visa stuff. Doesn't make sense. There's no stages this year, but if there were, we'd run into the same issue. So I think if we do make any acquisitions, we'd have to do it via trade with another team in the league, or if that Korean player has a P1 visa already.
Yeah, like for instance, Koma comes to mind, or someone like him, right? I'm not sure what the case is for Koma specifically, but there are teams that I think got some of their players 2-year P1s.
Okay, so what happens with P1s is once you're no longer on an OWL team, it's like once your contract is ended, your P1's done.
But the reapplication thing is easier, I believe. I'm not 100% on this.
I don't.
That's what my basis.
Yeah. Sure. From my experience, it's been pretty much the same process. Like it's not faster reapplying, because like we got Kuki a P1 or P1S, and it took just as long as anyone else. And he's had two different P1s. Like I would like it if the U.S. government was like, hey, turns out this guy has been a terrorist like the last 2 years that he had a P1, so like you can come in. But I don't know. I don't control the P1 process. It is what it is.
Yeah. That's the
best way I've ever heard it put.
It would be nice to just have like a visa resume. Just be like, look, I haven't done anything in these countries. I unfortunately had to leave because my job expired. But can we expedite this? Maybe fast track me.
By the way, fun fact: the German government here actually now fully recognizes esports visas. You just got to make over 35K a year. You got to be signed to an organization that has significant infrastructure here, and you got to be over 16 years old, and then you can just get a visa fairly easily here. So
Sorry,
All right.
I'm.
Just
Give me 1 second. I'm ordering an Uber for someone. That just
No worries.
classic. Do you
Fair
get these
enough.
company
Someone's
accounts?
gone. No, I'm just kidding. Someone's what?
Do you
Do I
get these
have-
company accounts?
Yes, we have a company. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Can't
I'm
imagine
not,
doing
I'm not
it without.
paying for
Yeah.
it.
I've
gotta
heard
go quite a lot of
I've heard
money.
very fun stories about basically. I'm not sure who you're calling this for, but there are players they can't do anything independently. Like literally
Oh, yeah.
sending them to 7-Eleven will result in disaster. Like
Yeah, I mean,
it's insane.
this is esports. They don't really go outside sometimes, and yeah, not as much life experience.
Mhm.
I found. So yeah, that's what I'm here for. I went to college. I had a, yeah.
And
so
now you're a father of 9 players.
Yeah, right.
Well, I do have managers help me out. Helpfully, I have two really good managers under me, so they help me a lot. With they speak Korean. Obviously, I don't speak Korean.
Sure.
Not yet. I should probably get on that. But
It's too hard.
yeah, I have
Not
two
worth it.
I have
Google
two managers
Translate,
under me
it's
that
good.
are there to help. So MDS and Swing Chip, and they assist me a lot with day-to-day stuff.
That's actually a nice segue into generally talking about your staff. And of course, we're first and foremost interested in your head coach.
Okay.
And how that thing goes. And let's be honest, it's always really hard to judge staff and then judge staff from Runaway specifically, because like the one or the biggest indicator you have that someone is a good coach is achievements or placements, right? Like, for instance, now we can say with decent confidence, Krusty is a very good coach, right?
Sure.
Now, of course, like Cookie doesn't have that history yet, given that he was a player, and of course he also coached for one of the well-established organizations in Korea. We know like that there's a history of that organization doing well with whatever head coach they have,
Right.
and certainly like people who know the internals know that the owner's also pretty hands-on generally.
Right.
So, what was the process like, and how did you end up deciding for Cookie?
So I went to. Oh, how many coaches did I interview? 1 sec. Let me check my spreadsheet.
Let me just pull up the sheets.
Yeah, no,
Where's
I
them
think
resumes?
I think I interviewed 20 plus coaches this off season.
Mhm.
I interviewed so many coaches. Yeah, so for head coach, for assistant coach, the most important is finding head coach first. So we kept Insight, just a segue or caveat. We kept Insight because he was really good for us last season. He solo coached a lot. But the players, we felt we needed more of a leadership figure at head coach. And Insight's a great coach. But he's more of a personal like one-on-one coach than like a being able to control. Like it's definitely a skill to control a team, right? 9 players, or
Definitely.
for us 9 players, up to 12 players plus staff, and delegate tasks. Like it takes a certain type of person to do that. So like, Insight's really good. So we kept him as assistant coach, but we were going to search for a head coach. So yeah, I interviewed so many coaches. Talked to different coaches. Talked to 9K, like he ended up going to Paris. Talked to Rush, he ended up going to Paris. Talked to, honestly, you name like the free agent Korean
Aid.
coach, I probably talked to him. Well, Aid was part of the 9K package.
Okay,
Gotcha.
okay.
They were like a little posse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had some of those, some duos and stuff like that, and that wanted to work together. So yeah, I mean, most importantly, I looked at what we needed. It's like, okay, we need a flex DPS. Okay, like Cookie got recommended by players on our team, our current team, and then plus I talked to like Yaki and Gamjin, and they wanted to go where Cookie went. So that was a big part of, or like an added bonus to signing Cookie is like being able to have a leg up on the competition in terms of getting Yaki and
Sure.
Gamjin. Which is very important when it comes to off season when you're going after some of the top players and Korean contenders that can go anywhere because there's no draft, right? So like the rich can always get richer, and it's like we're the worst team, like we need additional firepower to convince players to come. and they wanted a full Korean team, which there's not too many full Korean teams out there that aren't already like stacked to the gills with talent, right?
Sure.
Mhm.
And yeah, Kuki, he doesn't have too much head coach experience, but like he's 28. Like so for Koreans, like age is fairly important in terms of like level of respect, and like if they're older than all the players, then they have a level of respect just naturally from their age. It's part of the culture, and plus he's been through the army, so like we don't have to worry about losing him to military service. He's done the army thing. He's a former pro player, which I think is important. And yeah, I went to Korea, watched his like presence in the booth. I talked to Runner about him, talked to different players about Kuki, talked to Kuki himself, and he's also bilingual. Like that's really important for us, because our owners, my bosses are, I'm not bilingual. I don't speak Korean. My bosses don't speak Korean. I think it's important to have someone that can bridge that gap. Even though we have translators, it's like if he wasn't bilingual, I wouldn't be able to just like talk to him in a room, like, hey, what's up? Like have it more casual, just talk. So I'm able to communicate with him super easily because he speaks basically fluent English. He likes to say his English isn't great, but like his English is perfect. I think the first few times we talked, we had a translator, and I was like, they're literally not translating because they're just responding to what I'm saying. So yeah, happy to have Kuki. Interviewed tons of potential head coaches. But yeah, he just worked out really well for us. Bilingual, good coach, good recommendations. Helped us get players that we needed. So yeah, arguably one of the most important pickups, if not the most important pickup for us this offseason.
Also, like, of course, a great storyline in terms of the revenge of Cookie. Like he just came in and goes like, I got benched for you on the Valiant. I had to play main support. No, I can't bench you. Don't pull anything with me, kid. Like
no, he's actually on the roster, so he'll be our main tank for.
Yeah,
right. no. They actually have a really good relationship. Fate was one of the players that recommended him. He likes working with Kuki, and yeah, so no friction there.
Nice. It's good.
I mean,
and I am interested to see how he handles travel in general. I think is understated, and how it affects teams. So it'll be interesting to see a fairly young coach, not a young person in the scene, but a young coach handle putting out all these fires. I think that's going to be a big test, and leave him to the wolves. And if he comes out, you know what, he might come out and surprise a lot of people. So.
Personally, I think the travel is mostly on myself and the managers in terms of making sure they're comfortable. Like there's not crazy stuff they have to do to get to practice. There's enough work just being a coach.
Totally.
In and of itself. So,
but I mean, let's face it. You have players that have spent the last 2 years, depending on how long they've been in the professional space, playing in a 4x4 for 6 to 8 hours, upwards of maybe 10 hours a day, and now you're asked them to practice less. They feel probably a whole lot worse about their gameplay, and we have the stress of travel, which of course like you guys are covering, but that's still very stressful. Just traveling. Honestly,
I think probably the biggest thing to performance in terms of overall like record is going to be health. Like player health. I think that's probably the number one like biggest variance going into next year. It's like, how are these? Because I think gamers,
we got vitamin regimens.
Yeah, gamers pretty much have the worst immune system I found. Like they always just like, oh, I have the plague. It's like you went outside for like 2 days.
Right.
How did you come back with the bubonic plague? Like I don't understand. Like, right. So like I'm concerned when they go because the homestand is going to be very convention like.
Yes.
In terms of the type of people there, like the type of environment they're going to be in.
We've got
and then there's stress, and then they're playing like everyone wears the same headsets, like I don't know. All it takes is one person to go on stage, start coughing, and then it's over.
Yeah, it seemed like all last year it was like, Jake's sick, everybody's sick, this guy's sick, we're all sick. Great, beautiful.
It's like that's like my number one thing that I'm trying to prepare for going to travel is like making sure we're stocked on like the vitamin C, like the emergency, the the vitamins, like making sure that they can be on stage. and then the rest of that is on them to perform. But yeah, taking care of their bodies is going to be like a number one priority for next season.
That's the big brain move. You need an on-hand doctor. You just need to, Florida Mayhem coming in hot. We have a PhD student to take care of our players, on hand. Mess, we don't need the cooks. We don't need, managers. Yeah, we need them. But you know what? Doctors is the new frontier. Just saying.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
also,
Joe.
and
Joe just wants his own doctor. Doesn't want to leave.
I want my own doctor. Just on hey, I got this rash.
The next team manager position, you have to be a doctor.
Do you have your medical degree, and are you willing to take?
Are you a nurse?
30% of what you can make getting a residency at a hospital.
Yeah, we're only taking doctors in 2021.
The other thing, and not to destroy the mood here, even though it probably will. The other thing, of course, is also mental health, and
sure.
Especially like last season, I heard some nigh horror stories of general, not just players, by the way. I think that's an undervalued thing that staff also definitely suffers from the stress, from the long hours, like just like people going like, can I please only work 90 hours, please, not 105 or something like that, right? So is there anything in plan to look out for the mental health as well? Because on one hand, one thing, and I definitely sympathize with this as well, is and more so when you have hybrid rosters, if you get a performance coach or if you get even a psychologist in, it's probably more efficient to have one that speaks the language of the players.
Sure.
So for a hybrid roster, that's a problem.
Totally.
Yeah.
For you guys, that's more
Also
manageable, even though finding a Korean-speaking person in NA is probably also a challenge. Have you done any considerations in that regard?
So actually, Ben's wife is a psychologist by trade, and she will be. I don't know what exactly her office hours is going to be, but she will be available to talk to players, staff, whoever in the company really needs to talk, like vent or need some counseling. She's going to be available. I think it's probably going to be mostly on how comfortable our players are with the managers. Like, if you're comfortable with the manager, you probably don't mind them being in. You probably vent to them already. So just having them in a room with a psychologist is, just a little step above that. Not too far removed from just venting to your manager. You just have a licensed health professional there in the room as well. So yeah, I think definitely an option. Remains to be seen, like how often we'll need to use it, or demand. And because I think Koreans, like, I don't want to generalize, but I think generally they kind of, I am going to generalize. they're grinders. I think most of them are heavy grinders, and they kind of almost see it as a weakness if like they lose the motivation to grind hard. Because that's how they got out of that region, right? Like Korea is like super competitive. Like every player is spending crazy amounts of hours. And then I think for a lot of them, they feel like if they let up even a little bit, like someone else is just going to take their spot the next day. And there's I think there's a lot of pride in being that grind mentality for Koreans at least. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But we do have a psychologist on site if need be.
That's great.
Very cool.
That's also, by the way, a thing where there were some offers around the league. Like, for instance, I remember that someone told me that Blizzard had like a workshop to deal with stress.
Yeah.
And they didn't even fill up like a 15-person workshop just because everyone's too busy. Yeah. Or, of course, like there's a barrier to taking those type of things, right? You can only offer.
I mean, I also think it's kind of a weird setting if you're just like, hey, now if you're there, then you have to interact with all the other coworkers that now know you're stressed, and it's like, it's kind of a weird situation instead of being like private.
Use it as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's like a
hey, stressy boy. Yeah.
It's like, I'm not even stressed. I'm just here to figure
shirts.
out.
Yeah, right. I was paid to be here. Like, I'm not stressed. Are you stressed? Yeah, I'm perfectly fine. Was that
gosh.
not with the big streamer mental health professional that just I think Dr. Kanoja, Dr. K? Isn't he? Was he not the guy who did the whole seminar at the Overwatch League? I want to say that he was.
Was he?
I think I want to
That would
say
be
so.
actually quite interesting.
He did. I believe he did an interview with Jane, and it was kind of brought up, and it was intimated that he was, but don't know if he was. Seems very good. I found some use in his content. Definitely go check him out if you need
If
it.
I remember correctly, that seminar was mid-season too, right?
Yes,
I believe
it was.
so. Yeah.
Nobody's gonna go mid-season
Yes.
to like Blizzard Arena just for a special seminar on, like they're too busy stressing out practicing, trying to win games. I think the time for
Too
that is like
stressed to
before
address it
season,
right now.
Or
Right,
during
like
like a mid-season break or something.
right? Sure, yeah. I think just the timing of it was a bit off as well.
For sure.
Maybe staff showed up, but even then, it's like players are like, "Hey, where's my coach?" Like, "Oh, he's at this seminar for like stress." And then the players are like, "Oh
He's
no,
stressed, he's
God."
talking to
yeah,
somebody.
He's stressed. Oh.
the players are like, "Oh, like we're screwed." Like he's
Yeah.
stressed out. Like I'm stressed out now. Like
The world is burning.
I think for everyone, like the way I work is I sprint to the end of things. So like that's what I view Owl as. Like you have a nice, well, now that I'm GM, I actually don't really have an off season because the off season is like when
That's your season.
That's my season to do the most that I have to do the most work for. So actually I take that back. But I guess I've just been sprinting for 2 years and I don't know what walking looks like anymore. So
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. I think it takes a certain type of person to be in the industry, and I think for some people, they need to take breaks more than others, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But for me, I guess I haven't really taken a break, but I kind of like it this way.
A lot of people are built for that. Like that's totally okay, and that's okay for there to be professions and industries where you have to grind to be successful, and like that's okay. It's so
like okay. So I'll give you an example. Like our Runaway, like most of the players have a big off season break. Like they basically have a summer break, to recharge their batteries and get ready for the next season. I feel for our Runaway players because they didn't have a break. They went from like playing in all those cups, like, and then they did the showdown, then they went to the NetEase, and then after that they got signed, and then it's like then they had to practice again. Like I think they got month, maybe probably less than a month actually. And that whole time they're also like negotiating, like trying to figure out where they're going to be next year. So I feel for them, but they've been, I think Contenders has also been a pretty grindy place historically.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll get a nice long break by the end of the season. But for now, it's
on.
I mean we're a month. Season starts in a month, so yeah,
we're close.
No time for breaks now.
So with the season starting in the month, we started doing our power rankings where we kind of go usually 5 teams at a time, and there's an elephant in the room, and his name is Joe.
Yeah,
and
there's usually
Joe. So Joe is a Mayhem skeptic this year, and I don't think I would say that he's not a majority, but he's not alone in the fact that there are a lot of people who go, "All right, Mayhem, you got to prove it to me." So where do you like what are the goals for the 2020 season? I think just kind of ethereally, but also just like in concrete, like this is where we want to finish. This is where we think our team can finish.
Well, I think it's one of many. I think it's still pretty hipster to be a fan of Mayhem, other than for the colors at the moment.
Very true.
Great.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Looks great.
I'm sure we have a ton of like, hey, I'll buy a Mayhem skin, but it's like, but I don't think they're gonna win. So yeah, I think placement wise, I'll be happy with 12th. Like I think play-ins is a reasonable goal for us to make. I think that's a good baseline goal to achieve and to strive for. What we do past being in play-ins, like that's up to the team. But for me, when I built this team and I looked at all the rosters, like I expect us, and I think we have a very good shot at making playoffs. I think going from my goal is to be the most improved team, and I think going from bottom of the league to making playoffs is a reasonable and huge, achievable goal, while also being a very big change.
Right. No one's talking
I-
about Shanghai as 0-40 anymore after last season.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not like, and I'm not the type of person to overhype something. So I'm like, hey, we're insane. We're gonna win it all. We're top 5. I'm not that type of person. Could we be there? Sure, but like it's a long season. I don't know how many meta changes we're gonna have this year.
Totally.
Super hard to
It's a
predict.
gamble, yeah.
So I think anyone making predictions on like who's gonna win is crazy.
Yeah.
I think Chalk's the favorite, obviously. As with
Yeah.
any league, it's like, oh, you won it last year, like you're gonna win it. You have the highest chance to win it this year.
Yep.
For Spitfire, that was probably wrong. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of
how
us
this
put
season
London
went.
top 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the way Spitfire won it all, they were like already red, or like kind of like red flags in terms of like how high
Yeah.
you could be on them. But the way Shock had won, I think there's like no doubts that
Yes.
they were.
Yeah,
Like,
it was
they
a
just,
much more
they just, like,
consistent.
the only times they had a little like was like first stage when they're figuring out between like their 4 DPS players, like their 4 incredible DPS players, like who's gonna start for us in goats.
Mhm.
It's like when they finally put Rascal on Brig, they're like, oh, now
We got it. We found
then
it.
They just started rolling, right? So and they just rolled through the season. Meta change didn't matter. Playoffs meta change didn't matter. Like they're on top of everything.
I think maybe they were a little slow to the playoff meta, and they could have maybe prepared for that a little bit better and just clean swept everything. And that Atlanta game I think really showed a lot. But once they got their bearings about them, it was off.
I mean, that Atlanta game they won. They just threw it. Like that was
Until they didn't,
C9, yeah, like they definitely should have won that.
Sure.
They won that last fight.
Yep.
I think you should give every they weren't perfect, but I think they were as close to perfect and definitely the most dominant team as
100%.
anyone could expect.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Besides when Shanghai pulled out their
Crazy
their
weird.
stage 3 playoff thing. So yeah.
I think that if anything, that's the one mortal thing that we can consider about the Shock is that they are sometimes a little late to the meta and they aren't as dominant as we know them to be, where they just don't drop a map. And maybe it's also on Krusty, because he said the same thing, I think, if I recall correctly, about him coaching South Korea, especially in the Bastion comps.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, like I'm not up to snuff yet. On that specific thing, which is hilarious because team, of course, utilized that as well. But sometimes teams coach themselves in certain regards as well.
Sure.
I want to say for the World Cup teams, it's more. I think the bigger impact is like how well the players collectively understand the meta than like per se the coach, because like most players have like deep ingrained like habits based on like who they played with, how they played, who was coaching them. That I think coaching World Cup is like such a hard position to be in, because like you lose, it's apparently it's your fault, and you win, it's like it's like, oh, the players won that.
Players carried you, obviously.
Right, exactly. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I definitely feel for any coach, any player in like World Cup, because I think there's more. Honestly, I think there's like more negatives than positives, and because there's only one winner, right? Someone's gonna be disappointed if you're Korean, you don't win, like, which is what happened. It's like.
Yeah,
Korea's like, "What? You guys are all garbage now." Like, like
don't come home. You know what?
Greater than
Cancel the
Korea.
flights.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Krusty's the best coach, but he can't beat like Aero like the US.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel for them a lot. Ultimately, like World Cup's for fun, but
Yeah.
sure.
if you're ever a player or a coach, like you don't view it as that. And most people looking at the results are like definitive, like US is the best country now. Like that's full stop. Like that's it. No,
Right.
ignore the like the legion of talent that Korea has, but USA is on top. So yeah,
I couldn't agree more with what you said.
That's
That's what you said. I'm gonna clip that out of context.
Unabashed patriot.
Such true words.
Yeah, I'm gonna clip it out of context, and then I'm gonna go farm that Reddit karma right now. Yeah. No, I mean, but you're right though, right? Like there's World Cup, I think, has a lot of value in just like introducing us like to a lot of people as like an introduction of Gushue, right? Where we watched him through contenders and we're like, yep, this guy's all it. But it wasn't until we saw him in World Cup where it's like, oh, everybody else now thinks that Joe isn't this the crazy dude who walks around in his like China flag underpants,
Yeah.
like no shirt, just like Gooseway is gonna do it, brushing his teeth in the mirror, and
Yeah.
So
Listen, about the World Cup format, I'd prefer it if either if you do it every year, I think you need to have like OWL players and OWL coaches excluded
Sure.
and use it as to identify
Farming
talent.
ground.
I'd much prefer that. If you
I
want to
agree.
have like the Olympics where it's like, oh, this is the best
Every
of the
4
best, like
years. Yeah.
don't have it every year. Like it is so give the players a break, like give the coaches a break. I think it's a tough position to put players in if you're telling them like, hey, we want you to represent our country. It's like, well, I just like finished a grueling OWL season. It's like, but I want to represent my country. And then it's like,
right.
I think at the end of the day, if they didn't have to make the decision, if it was just like, oh, well, I can't play in the World Cup anyways because I'm an OWL player, like it doesn't really benefit OWL players. Who benefits from World Cup is
Exactly.
Contenders, 2 or 3.
are the amateurs, are the players that haven't made it yet. And that's like some of the biggest storylines is like, oh, this like unknown person like just stomped on, whatever country.
Yeah.
So
And-
like I'd much prefer that. Yeah.
And I agree, and it's something I think I said when and this is back when I did a totally different podcast. Is just like I don't the downside of not having OWL talent is that how many people are going to tune in for non-OWL talent if they don't see the
Sure.
the Jakes with the USA flags and stuff. If you don't get those pictures, how important is it? But at the same time, and I've been very much of the thing of like, I know it's not going to be as competitive anyway.
Yeah.
I'm already cheering for my flag anyway. I'm going to tune in for those Team USA matches pretty much. Even if Joe plays, like I'm tuning in. And sorry, Joe.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
So-
Maybe pick a different flag.
Yeah. But it's there's still that aspect there. But I get why it's lost. But I still think
Totally.
I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, also the World Cup trials, the process, like you have to trial for your World Cup team. If your country has trials, you have to scrim. Like that starts to affect if you're a player that's in between teams or is looking for teams in the offseason. That affects your schedule. You then have to make a decision like, oh, do I have someone ring for me for the USA scrim, or do I do this trial? You have to make tough decisions. And I think that's.
I mean,
It's really
XQC
taxing.
wasn't even
Yeah.
there for half the matches for Team Canada.
Yeah, he's got to do
XQC
media obligations and stuff.
XCC had a streamer obligation for Blizzard, and they had to put. Did they play Mangachu as main or?
Yeah.
Something like that,
Mangachu. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. I think it's a valid point. If you're just like, okay, we do want it to be World Cup to be the best of the best. Fine. Like make it every 2 years. Make it like not. I think what
Draw
you're
the
gonna.
spectacle out.
I think what you're continue to see is for teams like, so I think USA, like they had an axe to grind, right? They were like, we think we're the best right now. We're going to field like our absolute A team and, try as hard as we can to finally win like a gold medal. I think for most other teams, you're going to start to see OWL players as like, depending on how many years they've been in the league, they're going to slowly start to be like, nah, I'd rather like take the rest, or like, nah, thanks. Like I've made the team, but like I'm going to decline and give it to someone else. I think that's my prediction for how it's going to continue to go. If you have it every single year, it's just naturally you're going to have, it's going to go from like top of OWL to like slowly like make its way down, as more players just realize, it's not worth the headache, like having fans being mad at me. Like no one's going to be mad at you if you declined, but everyone's going to be mad at you if you like. Right, everyone's going to be mad at you if you lost the game on stage.
Yep. No, that's a good point.
You can direct that practice into, trialing for OWL teams, trialing for, a promotion and contenders to an academy team, moving into another role, this, that, the other thing. And Blizzard can use those resources elsewhere. If you're not going to do World Cup every single year, maybe put on another contenders land, give these experience to the next generation of talent and get these players out there and give them the experience that they would get in the Overwatch League. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the most important thing you could give somebody is like real world applicable experience. That's playing online, playing at home. That's as good as it's gonna. Well, not as good as it's gonna get, but like lands are so like important that I don't think people talk about.
On the talent side, they already use World Cup as like a platform to try out like new formats, new pairings. So it's like, if you're already using it to develop your on-screen talent, like why not use it for the players?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a GM now of a full Korean team, right? So we can talk a little bit about like interesting prospects, let's say from other regions from the World Cup.
Yeah.
And like players that you thought really were like outstanding talent that one should look at. Notice you can, if you know that they're very toxic, you can now really hype them so other teams pick them up and basically plant a bomb in the other camp. So,
I mean, this probably hurts me, but I don't know. I'd say Leaf. He's French. Paris needs a backup. I don't know. I think that makes sense. He's a bit older. I don't know about his comms or his attitude or anything, or maybe he has beef with former like players on the team. I have no idea. To me, like Leaf looks like he'd be a good, like, if not for Paris, like, I don't know. I'd have to think of rosters.
Valiant definitely with a lack of, I think, Doomfist specialists.
Yeah.
Doomfist. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember KSF's Doomfist actually. Can't remember if it's good or not. I just don't remember footage of him playing Doomfist.
Yeah. Not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I think Leaf is the one that comes off top of my head. Other players, I mean, we knew Leaf didn't get to show up for China, unfortunately. I was really excited to see him play.
Yeah, Leaf.
Yeah.
I like you more and more, Albert. I like you more and more. You're selling me. You're selling me.
They're climbing on up the power rankings.
Okay,
all you have to do is just chill for China.
I think the thing people don't.
Oh, this Leaf. I'm dumb.
Okay. Don't remember is Mayhem Academy was mostly like Western European mix. Like I watch all other regions. It's not just Koreans. Like I'm not just a diehard Korean fan. Like I watch other regions. I watch Tier 3. I keep up with the scene. I think I was very disappointed actually when we won the Open Division. I'm glad we got knocked down and didn't actually qualify for contenders because that would have been very embarrassing. But seriously, like a team with I think right now people are upset about like the X Tier 1 like Open Division team.
Sure. That
they're like, they're just gonna come in and like smash people. It's like if they do, like that's bad. That really like they shouldn't be winning. They're not gonna scrim. Like you look at all those players on the team, most of them are probably like scrimming, or not scrimming, streaming, or like have other obligations. Like this is just like, oh hey, we have nothing else to do, so let's like play Open Division and pug it out. Like that's what I did with, my like friends, my ex teammates and stuff like that. So if we can do that and win, like that says more about the talent level of Open Division than anything else. Because in any other, you shouldn't be afraid of that. And on top of that, it's good practice. You're not gonna. When else are you gonna be able to play against former Tier 1 players? They're gifting free practice right there.
Yeah, totally. To go back to World Cup for a moment,
sure.
I think we'd be remiss to not mention Visibility. Solid talent that could be fit into quite a few teams.
I don't think I'm as hot on Visibility, but I have prior experiences with him. We actually back when I trialed him back when we built NRG. So yeah, I've known about Visibility for a while. I know World Cup people were talking about like Fisher, Visibility. Yeah. I personally am pretty high on KSP. Sure, I've been watching KSP for a while. I think he's basically the next coming of Shax, but he's
I agree.
British. Yeah, but he's British. So yeah, I'm excited about KSP. I think right now that's probably the top two, like at PS, KSP, and Leaf, I'd say from the European region that I'd be like, if I were building a European team, I'd look into. Not saying I'd necessarily sign them, but definitely top prospects for me. And I put Fisher and Visibility up there in like same tier, but I'd put the KSP and Leaf over them for now.
Yeah.
Sure. Totally.
We need to wrap up here for a second. Avast did hop in to the chat and ask, can we ask Albert why he's so smelly? And it's because he doesn't hang dry his clothes.
Yeah, it's not because I don't hang dry my clothes, and it's pretty hot in my office right now. I haven't had a chance to reset the thermostat. Yeah, so sorry, Avast. Yeah, I guess he has smell-o-vision. It's 2020.
So the other thing we always ask anybody who comes on representing a team is, there's a lot of Mayhem fans out there. Do you have a message for them? Anything you want to say to them going into the 2020 season?
Yeah, I mean, appreciate everyone that's been on board since day one. I know, a lot of identity shifts, changing the team, changing like, personalities. But I think in terms of competitive standing, I think this is the most competitive team Mayhem's ever fielded. We've got new colors. Like, we're in a good position to hopefully turn this franchise around, turn the team around. And I'm happy you're still on board. If you're new because of the colors, I welcome you too. Buy our skins when they come out. Yeah, that's about it.
Sweet.
Maybe we'll have a Runaway-esque crew neck. Hopefully we can get that happening and capitalize on our colors and the
That'd be sick. I'd buy that.
I miss out on the first edition of the grandma sweater, so if Mayhem comes out with edition 2,
I still have one of those OGs.
Do you really?
They don't make them anymore?
I'd have to look. I'd have to like get in touch with somebody and to see. But I know, was there a website? I don't remember. It's been so long ago.
Listen, move us up a few. I'll talk to Kookie and see.
There it is.
Get it sweet with Runner. All right.
Now we get it. Yeah. Now it comes out. Cool. So Albert, then just for anything like shout outs, where people can find you, like let's dumpster all that stuff not really dumpster. Dump all that stuff in here so people can follow you throughout the 2020 season.
Yeah. So my socials is with 3 H's. That's about it. I have a Twitter. Instagram account's still in the works. I'll let you guys know when I think there's enough content to warrant plugging it. But at this time, you just mostly Twitter. And then I don't stream, but maybe I stream. We'll see. Also, same with 3 H's. I've been thinking about doing a podcast maybe of like how to get into the industry or like industry advice for like people just trying to get in. Because that's where I came from. That's like close to my heart in terms of like how to break in and how to like succeed.
That's great.
Step 1, don't.
don't have mental breakdowns on Twitter. Post weird stuff. Yeah. But yeah, other than that,
Jeez. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and close out then. Yiska, give us what's the who's it's on Patreon right now?
Okay, let's see.
Oh, I should start a Patreon. That's a good idea.
Jesus
There you
Christ.
go.
I didn't even.
Great.
Oh, man. You troll me, Joe. Okay. So the new patrons, Derek H, Louis K, not to be, mistaken for the unfunny comedian.
Louis C.K.?
Yeah.
Rex Z, Josh S. What? Why do you make me read this? Yiska's proud mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Nice.
That's great. We love that.
Mom, if you're watching, thanks. Ice Temp Jello. And then up pledges from Bo P and Jensen MW.
Thank you for the support.
So thank you to those who upped your pledges, and a big thank you to all the new patrons. We're really close. We might have actually passed the $250 goal. I'm not totally sure, but we'll know next episode for sure. Where I believe, unless we get another guest, I believe we're going to go back into our power rankings. That's patreon.com/tacticalcrouch if you want to support the show. We're going to have a game night coming up really soon. So,
be on the lookout.
That's going to be a ton of fun. Then no new 5-star iTunes reviews, but that's a great free way to support the show. So if you like the show and want to support it in a non-monetary way, that's a great way to do it. Otherwise, subscribe here at twitch.tv/KickedTripod. That also goes to directly support the show. We thank you for that. Yiska, shout outs for the week. Where can people find you really quick?
As always, Twitter, Yiska out. We'll write some stuff for GG Intel. And that's about it.
Sweet. Joe, as for you?
Find me on Twitter, Volamel, and all the social medias on same platform and same name. I'm doing some seeding tournament review and scouting, starting with China, and we'll be getting into a little bit of the Mayhem Classic and NA when it comes in a few days. So check out that. A few interviews coming, and that's about it.
Sweet. As for me, you can find me everywhere at KickedTripod. You'll notice that we don't have the background music playing. That's because I just don't want it to get copyright striked. So That's why it sounds so empty at the end. But find me everywhere at KickedTripod, and we will be back next week with another episode of Tactical Crouch. Yiska, play our outro music, please.
Oh my god.
Fade us out. Fade us out.
We're faded, that's for sure.
Oh.
All right, and clear.